Hello. Yes, I like to read you a story out of a book I already talked about, the 101 stories, the power of gratitude. Yeah, and I came over one story which is, well, kind of thing I'm doing also in my win-win world project, and it's called The Wafer. My husband, son, and I had recently moved to a small coastal community in Washington State. One cold, rainy morning after my husband left for work at the dental office, I decided to go into town to shop. I packed up my toddling son, placed him in his car seat, slipped a DVD into the player for him, got in the driver's seat, and away we went. A few minutes later, I noticed a person in a big overcoat walking in a large black lap down the side of the road. As I got closer, I raised my hand and waved at the nameless person. A little surprised, the person waved back. I smiled, he smiled. It happened in a split second, but it was a moment of clear communication. Coming back from town, I came upon a bearded older gent who was ambling down the road with a small driftwood log in each hand. I raised my hand and he raised a log. Smiles across both our faces. Over the next 5 years, I waved at everyone. I'm not sure what they thought of me. They might have been calling me that crazy lady who waves at everybody, but it didn't matter. It was fun, and it made me feel more connected to my new community. Then one November afternoon, my beloved husband died. That day I stopped waving at people. On the drive to town, I focused on the road in front of me. I kept my hands to myself and listened to my son talking in the back seat. I had to deal with the reality of being a widow. Many weeks later, a dark stranger raised his or her hand and beckoned to me. I waved weakly back and then smiled. Then I smiled. The person smiled. I couldn't tell you if it was a man or a woman, an old person or a young one, but I realized in that moment that I had to start reaching out again. I had a 7-year-old to bring up. He needed a mom who was connected and awake and living in the present moment. On the next trip, I started waving again. I initiated the waves. I had to force myself to do it, to crawl out of my depression and loneliness. But I did it. That was an immense step forward. I didn't know most of the people I waved to. Some became regulars, others were people I met along my tracks. What I realized was that the more people I waved at, the better I felt. Within weeks, I had returned to living a life full of zest. One day at the grocery store, I heard, "You are the one." I ignored the voice and continued to locate the perfect bag of tiny red apples. "Isn't it you, isn't it?" It's you, isn't it?" the voice continued. I couldn't figure out if I was the one being addressed. I placed a sack of apples in my basket. "You are the wafer, aren't you?" A hand came to rest on my shoulder. I turned to acknowledge the voice. "What?" "You are the one who waves at me in the mornings, aren't you?" "I don't know, am I?" "You drive a silver van. You must take a child to school in the morning. You always seem to drive by about the same time each day." I took a quick look at the lady. I didn't know her. "I'm the lady that works in the flower garden, on the street." I didn't recognize her or remember waving at her, but I said, "Oh yeah." "I have to tell you a story." I whispered, "Okay." A few weeks ago, I was standing in my garden allowing my rake to hold me up. I'd just been told that my baby sister was dying of cancer. I didn't want to work my garden anymore. I didn't see any reason to. Ella was the reason I had the garden. She bought the lot for me so that I'd have something to do when my husband went golfing. After my husband died, gardening became my passion. My mind jumped to my dead husband. It hadn't been that long ago that he had come home with 2 large rhododendrons for my birthday. He planted them in the front yard and said, "They are deep red. They'll be so pretty when spring comes." I sighed. He never got to see them bloom. "Anyway," she said as she dropped her hand to her side, "I was ready to call it quits. I didn't have any reason to tend my garden. With my sister dying, who would I give flowers to? Then you drove by. You waved at me and smiled. I let go of the rake with my right hand and waved back. Then I smiled. "Thanks for waving," I said as I started to push my cart away. She placed her hand on the handle of the basket and stopped me from moving. "The next day, you did the same thing. By the 3rd day, I was expecting your intrusion. On the 4th day, I got the call that my sister had died and you weren't there. This time I took a close look at her face, her immensely beautiful foggy blue eyes, her tawny, craggy cheeks, her pursued and tinted lips. I didn't know this lady, but from where? A week later," she went on, "I was out in the garden ripping out my just bloomed plants and throwing them on a small fire. I didn't have the gumption to till the land anymore. It felt like everyone in my life was gone. I'd worked the land long enough." Tears welled in the corners of her eyes. Then you drove by and waved. I stood up and waved back. As I started to bend down and grab another plant, you backed up, stopped, and rolled down your windows. You said, "I just wanted to tell you how much it means to me to see your flowers in bloom. You are out here, rain or shine. It lets me know that no matter what changes in my life, your flowers will always be here to brighten my day." She paused for a moment. I needed to hear that my passion made a difference. I reached out and touched her slender shoulder. I needed to hear your story. Tears filled both of our eyes as we bowed our heads in understanding. I still wave at strangers, but now I'm more likely to stop and say hi and make a friend. Yes, you never know what a smile, what a wave, what a saying hi can mean for another person. So please do it. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.